That's the top-selling, critically acclaimed Radiohead. Their drummer is Phil Selway, who's been a Samaritans volunteer for 17 years. This week, that charity is celebrating its 50th anniversary, and to mark the event, You and Yours has been hearing from people all week whose lives have been changed by their contact with the organisation. The Samaritans is almost completely funded by charitable donations, and it relies on thousands of unpaid volunteers like Phil to staff its call lines 24 hours a day. Winifred asks Phil Selway why, when he puts down his drumsticks, he chooses to pick up a phone for a good cause.
I became a Samaritan in 1986 during my first year as a student up in Liverpool, and I was drawn to it from a leaflet which came through in my Freshers' Week describing what qualities they were looking for in potential volunteers, somebody who was able to give people time and space to explore their own feelings, provide that emotional support, which I think a lot of people find lacking in their everyday lives. And for me at the time, it tied in with two things, really. I think going to Liverpool as a student, I wanted to actually make more of a connection with a place other than just sitting in the Students' Union with a snake bite. And secondly, I think having gone to an all-boys school where it was a very, you just don't talk about your feelings. Becoming a part of an organisation where it's a warm and supportive atmosphere to encourage people to open up, but just felt like a new start for me as well, really.
And did it provide for you what you hoped it would?
Yes, that and more, really. I mean, it's once you're become part of the organisation, I think, on the actual phone side, the actual contact with the callers, you realise what privileged position you're in. As the listener, somebody's letting you into their innermost fears, their innermost anxieties, and the contact you have with the other volunteers as well. I mean, I've met the most amazing people in my co-volunteers through being Samaritan.
You've carried on with it, even though you've had phenomenal success with Radiohead. Why?
It has been a part of my life since I was 19. I think it provided a constant for me, really, in the context of what was happening with Radiohead. That was changing vastly. And to actually then have a contrast of that and come back to Samaritans where you're not the focus of it, the callers are the focus of it, and it's channeling your ability to listen, your ability to give support.
People listening might be sceptical that you've actually really genuinely carried on with it. I mean, is it possible to volunteer regularly, to give the sort of time that you're asked to give as a Samaritan and still be in a very successful band?
I have 3 young boys under 5 years of age now, so at the moment I'm actually, with quite a busy touring schedule, I'm actually a non-listening volunteer at the moment, but we'll return to the actual listening side of it in the future. But yes, whether you're in a band or whatever job you do, I look at the other volunteers and they have these very full schedules and they manage to fit in their commitment as a Samaritan volunteer.
What sort of insights would you say that being a Samaritan has given you into some of the big issues that affect young people now? For example, the steep rise in the suicide rate among young men. Do you feel that you understand some of those things better for it?
I think what comes back is that this isolation, this fear of losing face by opening up and talking about your feelings, is a lot of pressure, and people going through these periods of radical change in their lives, moving from being effectively a child to being a young adult, and all that brings along with it, all the pressures of doing exams through to trying to find out how you can work in a professional environment beyond that. And unless you've actually got some kind of area where you can actually go and talk openly, these factors all become incredibly overwhelming.
And do you think that what you have heard in the Samaritans over the years has fed into your music?
It's fed into me as a person, and then I suppose by association the kind of person that I am is very evident in our music.
But in the sense that the songs are often described as melancholy, do you think that some of that has come through from what you've heard?
Possibly have a melancholic side to myself. I don't think music has actually strictly been informed by my experience in Samaritans. After all, I'm just the drummer.
The Samaritans have always had this very strict rule, haven't they, that when you take a call, what you're asked to do simply is to listen.
Yeah.
How important is that, do you think, that you call somebody who doesn't try to give you help or advice, who simply hears what you have to say?
I think in most instances in our everyday lives, we're not given the space to actually explore our own feelings. And whereas, coming to Samaritans, it's not necessarily a cure-all, but it's a very important first step to actually finding a way through those feelings, finding a way to actually move forward. So I think when you're training to become a Samaritan, everything is focused on actually really honing your listening skills, so that even though, it sounds quite a passive thing to do to actually listen, it's a very active process. You're listening to the spaces in between what people are telling you. And if you're listening properly, the right questions or the guidance comes from the caller themselves, which is how it should be.
Phil Selway, and in the final part of our series tomorrow, how becoming a Samaritan can reap unexpected rewards of a romantic nature.